I went to help my friend's mom in the kitchen, and dessert wasn't the only thing she was serving. The sun was dipping behind the trees as I walked up the path to my friend's house, the air carrying the faint scent of early autumn leaves and freshly cut grass. I had come over to hang out, maybe catch a movie, but when I opened the door, the quiet warmth of the kitchen caught me off guard. The faint smell of vanilla and something sweet, cinnamon, perhaps, made my stomach rumble. She was there. My friend's mom, in a simple yet elegant outfit that somehow made casual cooking look effortless. A soft blouse rolled at the sleeves, her hair loosely tied back, a few strands framing a face that seemed both confident and welcoming. She looked up from the counter with a gentle smile, and for a moment, everything else, the chatter of the house, the clutter of daily life, fell away. "Hey," she said, her voice smooth and calm, carrying just enough warmth to make me feel noticed. "Want to give me a hand?" I hesitated. I wasn't sure what exactly she expected, but the offer wasn't commanding, it was inviting. I nodded, and stepped closer, noticing small details, the subtle glimmer of her wedding band, the way her hands moved with care as she arranged bowls and utensils, the light dusting of flour on her fingers. She handed me a knife to chop fruit, and the brief brush of her hand against mine sent a surprising warmth up my arm. There was something quietly magnetic about her presence. Not flashy, not demanding attention, but undeniably there, the kind of presence that made me aware of every small movement, the tilt of her head, the way she smiled at the counter's edge, the gentle arch of her brow as she tasted a spoonful of batter and nodded approvingly. I caught myself lingering near her side, adjusting my stance more than necessary just to be close without appearing obvious. We fell into an easy rhythm. The clinking of utensils, the chopping of fruit, and the soft hum of a distant radio blended into a private world I hadn't expected to find in a friend's kitchen. I noticed her occasionally glancing my way, a subtle flicker of curiosity in her eyes, and I realized she was just as aware of my presence as I was of hers. For the first time that evening, I felt something beyond simple admiration. A quiet curiosity, a sense of ease, a flutter of anticipation I wasn't sure how to interpret. She leaned over the counter to reach for a spice, her hair brushing lightly against my arm. I froze for a heartbeat, aware of the closeness, of the warmth radiating from her, and yet feeling completely safe, welcomed even. I had come to help my friend in a casual, straightforward way, but now, standing here, surrounded by the sense of dessert and progress, I realized I hadn't just walked into a kitchen. I had walked into a space where something unspoken and unexpected was beginning to stir, quiet, gentle, and entirely magnetic. And in that moment, the idea of dessert seemed almost secondary. We moved around the kitchen like we'd done this 100 times together, though it was the first time it had just been the two of us. She handed me a wooden spoon to stir the batter, and as our hands brushed, a spark of awareness ran through me, not shocking, not overwhelming, just noticeable. The kitchen smelled of warm sugar and butter, a comforting aroma that seemed to wrap around us, softening the edges of any awkwardness. I watched her closely as she worked. She sliced fruit with precision, the knife moving confidently yet fluidly, a small smile tugging at her lips as she caught my glance. There was a grace in her movements that I couldn't ignore, something in the way she tilted her head when she measured the flour or adjusted a bowl with delicate fingers. Even the casual ways she rolled up her sleeves seemed to carry a quiet elegance. "Careful with that knife," she said softly, and I felt a warmth in her voice that went beyond simple caution. I nodded, pretending to focus entirely on the task, though part of me wanted to linger near her side, noticing the subtle rhythm of her breathing, the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the sweet aroma of the kitchen. We settled into a rhythm, a kind of unspoken choreography. She would stir while I chopped, I would pour while she tasted. Our hands occasionally met over the counter, brief, accidental touches that lingered just a moment too long. I felt the warmth of her skin, the gentle pressure of her fingers as she guided a bowl into place, the tiny but meaningful closeness of proximity. Each touch carried a quiet intimacy that neither of us acknowledged aloud, but both of us felt. She laughed lightly when I fumbled with a spoon, a soft, musical sound that made the corner of her eyes crinkle in a way that made my chest tighten. I couldn't help but smile back, slightly embarrassed but secretly pleased that I had earned even this small reaction. The way she moved around the kitchen, so assured yet so approachable, drew my attention constantly, and I realized I was noticing everything: the tilt of her head, the way her hair fell across her forehead, the subtle way she leaned just slightly toward me when explaining a step. For a moment, we paused to wipe our hands on a towel. Our fingers brushed again, and I felt that familiar warmth spread, something unspoken but electric in its subtlety. I wanted to say something, to comment on how easy it felt to be near her, but the words stuck somewhere between my mind and my throat. Instead, I watched her, appreciating the quiet companionship, the understated connection that was forming in this simple, everyday setting. The kitchen no longer felt like just a place to prepare food. It had become a space where attention, care, and quiet curiosity intertwined. I realized that I wasn't just helping with dessert. I was part of a shared moment that felt suspended in time, a gentle rhythm of closeness and subtle attraction that neither of us had fully named but both were feeling. And through it all, I found myself wondering how something as ordinary as baking could become something so quietly intoxicating. The batter was finally smooth, and she leaned back against the counter, wiping her hands on a towel. I was supposed to be helping, but somehow, she had managed to make the kitchen feel like a stage for subtle games. Her eyes met mine, and there was a glint there, mischievous, warm, teasing, and I realized she was enjoying this little dance as much as I was. "Are you sure you know what you're doing with that whisk?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Her tone was light, teasing, but there was an undercurrent of curiosity, as if she wanted to see how I'd react. I grinned, trying to appear confident, though my hands betrayed me by wobbling slightly. "Of course," I said too quickly, earning a soft laugh from her. The sound was like music, low and comforting, and I caught myself leaning in just a fraction closer, despite knowing it was entirely accidental. Her laughter lingered in the air, mingling with the rich smells of sugar and vanilla, creating a bubble of warmth around us. She moved behind me to reach for a bowl, and our arms brushed, a light touch that sent a small spark through me. I froze for a heartbeat, suddenly acutely aware of her closeness, the warmth of her arm against mine, the subtle scent of her perfume, and the softness of her hair brushing my shoulder as she leaned over. She didn't pull away. Instead, she held my gaze for a brief moment, a silent acknowledgement that made my pulse quicken. "You're making it worse," she teased, nodding toward the slightly lopsided dollop of batter I had tried to smooth. Her hand rested lightly on the counter near mine, fingers brushing against my wrist just enough to make me hyper-aware of the contact. I laughed, shaking my head, and she smiled, a slow, knowing smile that felt like an invitation to linger. The playful teasing continued as we worked together, a rhythm forming between us. I would hand her ingredients, and she would lean just slightly closer to guide my movements, our hands touching fleetingly but meaningfully. She commented on my mistakes in the gentlest way, her voice carrying both humor and patience, making me feel both self-conscious and strangely exhilarated. There was an unspoken tension in every glance, every accidental brush of skin, a quiet push and pull that neither of us acknowledged directly but that was impossible to ignore. I found myself stealing glances when she wasn't looking, noticing the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed, the way she seemed completely at ease in the space around her yet acutely aware of my presence. Even something as simple as tasting the batter became charged with intimacy. She held the spoon out to me, their fingers touching briefly, and our eyes met, long enough to feel a subtle shift, to recognize the quiet spark that had been growing between us. It wasn't just about the baking anymore. It was about the connection, the teasing, the way proximity could feel electric without a word being spoken. By the time we were ready to pour the batter into the pan, I realized how completely absorbed I had become, not in the task at hand, but in her. And I knew, without either of us needing to say it, that the dance had only just begun. The kitchen fell quiet for a moment, the hum of the distant radio fading into the background. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely, a small thoughtful smile on her lips. I had been watching her all evening, the effortless grace, the teasing glances, but now, for the first time, there was something softer, more fragile in her expression. "You know," she began, her voice low and unguarded, "I always find baking therapeutic. It's one of the few times I can slow down and just focus on something simple." Her eyes drifted to the counter, then back to me, and there was a subtle hesitation, as if she weren't sure whether to let herself share this side of her. I nodded, stirring the batter absent-mindedly, careful not to spill anything. "I get that," I said quietly. "There's something calming about it, being hands-on and watching something come together." She smiled, the tension easing slightly from her shoulders. "Exactly. Sometimes it's like the world just disappears for a while. Even if it's just for an hour." Her fingers traced a faint pattern on the counter, and I noticed the delicate sweep of her wrist, the way her hand lingered over the surface as if grounding herself. I felt an unusual pull to say more, to connect in this unexpected intimacy. I never really thought about it like that," I admitted. "I guess I always rush through things, trying to get them done. It's nice seeing someone take their time, actually enjoy it." Her eyes softened, and she leaned just slightly closer, as if drawn by the shared understanding. There was a quiet weight to the moment, no teasing, no playful banter, just two people standing side by side, sharing something real. I became aware of the warmth radiating from her, subtle but undeniable, and the faint perfume that lingered in the air around her. My heart picked up its pace, not from fear, but from the quiet intimacy of the moment. "I don't usually let people in here while I bake," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "It's personal. And I guess I wasn't expecting company tonight." Her eyes met mine fully, and there was a flicker of vulnerability, a tiny admission that she trusted me enough to share it. I hesitated, then smiled gently. "I'm glad I got to see it," I said sincerely. "It's kind of amazing to see someone who knows exactly what they're doing, who's comfortable being themselves." Her expression softened further, a mixture of amusement and something deeper, maybe relief, maybe curiosity. She reached over to adjust a stray strand of hair at the back of her neck, her hand lingering near my shoulder for a brief instant. It was the kind of touch that said more than words ever could, a quiet acknowledgement of connection, of trust, of an unspoken bond forming between us. For a long moment we simply stood there, side by side, breathing in the warm, sugary air, listening to the faint clinking of utensils in the background. There was no rush, no need for words. In that silence, I realized how rare it was to feel this kind of closeness, this quiet understanding with someone, how the age gap didn't matter at all when the connection was this genuine. And for the first time, I truly understood, this moment wasn't about baking. It was about discovering the quiet beauty of someone opening up, and the unexpected thrill of being trusted enough to witness it. The kitchen, once a space of casual rhythm, suddenly felt smaller, warmer, more intimate. We were moving around each other with practiced ease now, pouring, stirring, arranging, but each motion carried an unspoken awareness, a subtle tension that neither of us fully acknowledged. I reached for a bowl of fruit, and she simultaneously leaned forward to grab it, our hands colliding gently. I froze for a heartbeat, feeling the warmth of her skin against mine, the unexpected electricity of the touch. She didn't pull away. Instead, she lingered for a fraction longer, her eyes meeting mine with a soft, knowing look that made my chest tighten. The air between us felt charged, the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of a clock magnifying the moment. As we continued, small gestures became charged with meaning. She leaned over to adjust a utensil, and her hair brushed lightly against my shoulder. The scent of her perfume, subtle and comforting, drifted closer with each motion. I felt the heat of her presence, the gentle brush of her fingers against mine as she handed me the whisk. Each accidental touch lingered just long enough to be noticed, yet fleeting enough to remain innocent. She laughed softly at my clumsy attempt to slice a piece of fruit evenly, and the sound made the room feel warmer, more personal. "You're improving," she said, the corners of her mouth curling up in amusement, though her eyes held a glimmer of something more, a quiet, affectionate challenge. I smiled, brushing my hand against hers in the process of grabbing a towel, and this time, neither of us flinched. The closeness was no longer accidental. It was a shared acknowledgement, a silent dance neither of us had named but both were participating in. I noticed her subtle movements, the way she shifted her weight when she leaned on the counter, the tiny tilt of her head as she tasted the batter, the soft crease of her brow when concentrating. Everything about her presence seemed to draw me closer, and I found myself unconsciously adjusting my own position to mirror hers, staying within the gravity of her warmth. For a moment, we both paused, reaching for the same ingredient. Our hands touched again, lingering this time just slightly longer. Her gaze softened, and there was a pause, a breathless moment where the world seemed to contract around us. I felt an urge to speak, to acknowledge the tension, but the right words didn't come. Instead, we simply smiled, a small, unspoken agreement passing between us that this closeness was welcome, even if undefined. Even the simplest tasks, a pour, a stir, a hand resting on the counter, became imbued with a quiet intimacy. I was acutely aware of her heartbeat, the subtle warmth radiating from her side, the gentle brush of her hair across my arm. And while I noticed the age difference, it didn't matter here. What mattered was the shared attention, the mutual comfort, the thrill of a connection neither of us could, or wanted to, ignore. By the time we had finished preparing the dessert, I realized that the kitchen was no longer just a place for food. It had become a space of proximity, trust, and silent tension. Every touch, glance, and shared smile had drawn us closer in ways neither of us had anticipated, leaving me both exhilarated and profoundly aware of the subtle pull she had on me. Finally, the moment arrived. The dessert was ready, carefully plated with the kind of precision that only someone who truly loved what they were doing could achieve. She carried it to the table, the soft clink of china accompanying each step, and for a brief second, she paused and smiled at me. "Now it's officially on the table," she said, a teasing warmth in her tone that made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't quite name. We sat down side by side, and she handed me a small fork. Our fingers brushed, lightly, almost casually, but this time, I noticed how deliberate the closeness felt, as if both of us were aware of the invisible thread connecting us. She didn't pull away. Instead, her hand lingered just long enough to send a subtle, thrilling shiver through me. The room smelled of caramel and baked fruit, mingling with the faint perfume that always seemed to follow her, creating an intoxicating cocoon around us. I took a bite, and she watched me, her eyes softening in a way that felt intimate, even though no words were exchanged. "Not bad for a first attempt," she said, her lips curving into that effortless, knowing smile that had been making my heart race all evening. I chuckled, secretly pleased, feeling the quiet pride of someone who had contributed to her world, even in a small, seemingly insignificant way. She leaned slightly closer to me, her shoulder brushing mine, and I felt the warmth radiating from her. It was subtle, but the effect was undeniable. My chest tightened, and my awareness of every detail, her hair falling just so, the faint crinkle of her eyes when she smiled, the rhythm of her breathing, heightened. The age gap, which had never seemed to matter until now, faded into the background, replaced by the undeniable pull of connection. "Thank you," she said softly, her hand resting lightly on my arm. The touch was brief, yet deliberate, like a silent acknowledgement of the evening we had shared, the flower, the laughter, the teasing, the accidental brushes of hands, and the quiet moments of closeness. Her eyes held something unspoken, something tender, and I felt my pulse quicken, a mixture of admiration, longing, and cautious hesitation. I looked at her and realized how unusual it was to feel so connected to someone, so comfortable, yet so aware of the magnetic presence she carried. I wanted to linger in the moment, to reach out and bridge the distance between us, yet I also felt the quiet understanding that some things didn't need words. The connection was already there, palpable and warm, built on shared time, subtle touches, and the intimacy of everyday life. We finished dessert in companionable silence, exchanging glances that were laden with unspoken acknowledgement. Each smile, each brush of hands against the table, reinforced the quiet revelation. There was mutual attraction, yes, but it was grounded in respect, admiration, and the deep comfort of emotional connection. By the time the last bite was gone, I realized something profound. Dessert had been the catalyst, yes, but what lingered wasn't the taste of sugar or fruit. It was the warmth of proximity, the thrill of shared space, and the quiet, electric understanding that something subtle, yet undeniably romantic, had begun to bloom between us. And in that moment, the world outside the kitchen felt distant, irrelevant, as if the universe had condensed into this small, shared bubble of connection. The sound of the front door opening signaled the return of my friend, a cheerful voice calling from the hallway. Instantly, the intimate bubble of the kitchen felt larger, more ordinary, but the warmth of the evening lingered, wrapping around me like a quiet secret. She straightened slightly, smoothing her blouse, and yet, there was no rush to break the connection we had formed. "Everything okay in here?" my friend asked, glancing between us. I offered a casual nod, but my attention remained on her. She gave me a brief, lingering smile, one of those smiles that seem to carry a private understanding. My chest tightened with a mixture of longing and gratitude, a subtle ache that had nothing to do with dessert, and everything to do with the bond we had quietly nurtured. As my friend disappeared down the hallway, I helped clear the remaining dishes. Our hands brushed again over a plate, a fleeting, accidental touch that felt heavier than it should have. She glanced at me, eyes soft, lips slightly upturned, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the warmth between us. There was no need for words. The lingering proximity, the quiet touches, and the shared laughter of the evening had spoken for us. "You were a great help," she said softly, placing a hand on my arm. The contact was light, affectionate, and grounding, sending a shiver of awareness up my spine. "I appreciate it." Her eyes held mine for a heartbeat longer than necessary, a silent acknowledgement of the subtle connection that had been building since I first stepped into her kitchen. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of pride, admiration, and quiet longing. "I'm glad I could help," I murmured, aware that these words were more than about baking. They were about the evening, the time we had shared, and the emotional closeness that had quietly grown between us. She stepped back, allowing the space to open naturally, yet I noticed the ease in her posture, the lingering warmth in her gaze. There was no rush, no awkwardness, just a calm, human closeness that spoke volumes. I realized that our connection didn't need to be verbalized. It had already been acknowledged in glances, laughter, and subtle, meaningful touches. As I walked toward the door, I felt her presence behind me, a comforting warmth that followed me even as I left the kitchen. I glanced back, and she gave me one last smile, a private, gentle signal that whatever had started here was understood and shared, even if unspoken. The subtle, slow-burn tension that had carried through the evening didn't resolve with a dramatic gesture. It resolved quietly, naturally, leaving a sense of satisfaction and anticipation all at once. I stepped out into the evening air, the faint smell of autumn leaves mixing with the lingering sweetness from the kitchen. My heart was still racing, not from fear or urgency, but from the profound warmth of a connection that had been carefully and deliberately nurtured. The age difference, the social boundaries, it all felt irrelevant in the presence of something so quietly compelling. And as I walked away, I knew one thing clearly: the evening had been more than just helping with dessert. It had been about discovering someone's warmth, experiencing the thrill of subtle, unspoken attraction, and leaving with the knowledge that what had begun in that kitchen could grow into something deeper, meaningful, and unforgettable. If you enjoyed this slow burn story, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more heartfelt tales of unexpected connections and quiet romance. Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear which moment in the kitchen made your heart flutter the most.